Hello, everyone. Pastor Dani and Pastor Justin here today for our sermon reflection. We're going to take some time and reflect on our sermon from yesterday, cultivating compassion and letting go of selfishness with the prodigal son. Justin, what were some of your thoughts as you pulled together a sermon for yesterday?
Yeah, totally. So, one is outside of the birth of Jesus, the resurrection, and probably the parting of the Red Sea, this is probably the next most popular story in all of Scripture, right? It has all these
Mhm.
cultural things that we talk about, right? Lots of people know this story who aren't even Christian or raised in the church. And so, anytime you come to a text like this, in one sense, it's easy, and in another sense it's really really difficult, right? Like, how am I going to preach this text in such a way that I grab a hold of people's attention and really get up the point of the story across, right? So that's what I was thinking when I was coming in. And so of course I leaned into my strength, which is Bible background and Bible information. And so that's what I jumped into. And so I really focused in on really the overview of the story and how it relates to the first three verses of Luke
Mhm.
chapter 15. And so, how does it relate to the tax collectors and sinners who were coming near to listen to him? And then, how does it relate to those Pharisees and scribes who were grumbling, saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them"? And so, that was my big piece in it all, was relating all of those things together and describing these groups, the Pharisees and the scribes, and particularly talking about how most people's view of the Pharisees, if they have any view at all, is probably wrong. That most
Mm.
people just pick the most conservative Christians they can think of, and that's how they think about the Pharisees. When in reality, the Pharisees were a pretty innovative group, and have a lot in common with us mainline Protestants actually today. So it was fun.
Mm.
I enjoyed being able to do that and kind of messing up kind of people's basic information about the prodigal son story.
Oh, I love that. Messing it up a little bit. Yeah, it's a fun, familiar parable, very challenging. I joked the way that I approached the sermon in the beginning was simply asking everybody in the congregation of who's an older sibling and who's a younger sibling in the room. And I did that one because it's fun to play on, family systems and our roles within our families, but also so that we understand, just as you were kind of saying, that we come to ancient texts, especially really familiar texts, with our biases. And we come from certain vantage points, we come from different life experiences or perspectives. So I joked about, how would we describe younger sibling versus older sibling in this story? Like, what are the characteristics that we typically give to them? And then how they're relating to each other in the story, which is very selfish, entitled, resentful. I kind of threw a joke in there too, giving away, me as a younger sibling, that I think the younger brother was just really curious and adventurous and wanted to experience life outside the box, outside the boundaries of his father's property, his father's land. But anyway, so we went through this whole description of, what it means to come to texts with our perspectives, and then recognizing that it's not even about our perspectives, that it's not even about the brothers at all here, but we're talking about God's compassionate character. So it was a great turnout at Covenant and at Winds of Grace. It was a ton of fun to get people engaged in the text and thinking beyond the typical, you know prodigal son characteristics.
I can just imagine you right now at your father's feet saying, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your daughter," you know. So
I have been there. I relate. I relate. And I
yeah.
joked too of like, this is an ancient parable. Jesus told this so long ago.
Yeah.
And I joked that none of us can relate. to this story, right? Like, of course we can. Within our family systems, within our roles as siblings, even within children, grandchildren, all of us can relate in some capacity to the relationship aspects that are taking place within this parable. Just as you said with the Pharisees, the tax collectors, and the people at large.
I like it. So let's move over to feelings and emotions.
Oh, this is a
Yeah, I know.
fun
I found a different
flower.
kind of one today. Yeah. And it's interesting in that some of the lines cut through different sections of it. And yeah, I've never seen this one before. And I was like, ooh, this
Yeah.
changes it up a bit,
The
right?
things that get us excited is a new emotions wheel flower.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, I think for me coming into this particular text was definitely this idea of anticipation, and we see that in that top left corner of this.
Mm,
Anticipation of both our church and congregations, and how you start reading this story and they're like, oh yeah, right, and you can even see it in their eyes. They're like, oh yeah, I know this story, right? As well as me knowing that I was going to flip the script a bit, right, and really kind of deconstruct this text in some ways for people.
mm,
And so for me, the anticipation there and the interest that creates, that was a ton of fun.
mm.
And I love how in this chart that puts that somewhere between aggressiveness and optimism, right?
Yeah.
Like, because that's true, right? Like
Hmm.
that's kind of where I was at, because there has to be this kind of this level of like, I'm gonna say these things, right? I'm gonna mess up this story, kind of aggressive, and yet this optimistic side of going, there's something really amazing in this story when we can get beyond like our Sunday school version of it for ourselves, right?
Mm,
And
hmm.
and it can really stand out to us and go, oh, I can take this into my life in a way that I maybe didn't think about when I first started reading the story.
Mm. As you mentioned, being between the aggressiveness and the optimism, the the feeling that I had was this admiration, but it kind of envelops all, like the love, the submission, the acceptance, and the trust. I felt truly all of that rereading the this parable and reflecting on the parable and how it makes me feel, knowing God, right? Like that we can squander all we have and all the wild living that we do, and God's compassion still covers us. And or we could be so self-righteous, so orderly, so attempting to be perfect, and still covered in that same compassion by God. So there's this deep admiration for God's character and how God, uh, like that motherly hen, just surrounds us with compassion, no matter what spectrum, what season of life that we happen to be in. And then there's also that bit of acceptance, submission of, I'm not perfect and I can't expect, my siblings to be perfect. I can't expect my neighbors to be perfect. And I can't expect our experiences in life to be the same and even similar in that case. But there can be a deep admiration for the diversity and a deep acceptance for uh, the different paths that lead us to our true selves.
Yeah. No, I love that aspect of all of that. Like there's such I mean, there's a reason why this particular story is one of the most popular in scripture, right? It
Hmm.
captures so much of what we hope, I mean, and believe certainly, but I think in this case more hope that God is like. right?
Yeah.
And how God interacts with us, because we can believe it all day, but when we're in the younger son position, right, like it becomes a hope. Like,
Mm.
I
Hmm.
hope it works this way, right?
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful, beautiful story. And I'm always excited when I get to preach it. Obviously comes up in the lectionary every 3 years. And I think I have preached it every single time, even if it makes me deviate from my sermon series. So,
Hmm. Such a good story. How can we put this parable, these scripture verses, into practice in our everyday lives?
yeah. You know, one of the things that I did in my sermon yesterday was I really applied it to our political situation in our nation and how many of us judge this other group. And no matter which side you're coming from, you're judging that
Hmm.
other side for the problems that exist. And you consider that group to be wasteful and to be selfish and to have all these, basically squandering whatever, right? And I hear
Hmm.
that from both sides all the time. And instead of seeing that we actually are family, we all belong to one another, we're all in this together. And really, what the world needs more than anything right now is not right beliefs or right living. It needs us to actually just grab a hold of one another and say, this person who once was dead, and I would say dead to me, is now alive.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that could change everything. What if we looked around at people that were like, I can't believe they voted differently than me, and they're the ones who created the situation 4 years ago, or they're the ones who's created this situation right now that we're experiencing, right? And go, well, what if I embrace them? What if we killed the fatted calf for them and celebrated, right?
Mm. Wow. Yeah, I love that challenge of they were dead to me and now they're alive. Because how often do we in our everyday lives just have blinders on even and just not even pay attention to people around us, and or make judgments about people who are around us and intentionally avoid those people at the supermarket, at the library, in the parks, wherever we spend our time, um, but to truly awaken to the reality that everyone is alive around us. And in this season of resurrection, resurrecting those relationships and that awareness around us. I like that. I like that intention. I think the way I would put this similarly into practice is seeking to understand different perspectives and recognizing, like as I said in my sermon yesterday, like God's compassion covers us no matter if we are following every book, every rule in the book, or if we are squandering everything away in wild living. And recognizing that if we do choose the wild lifestyle, that we learn from this story that there are consequences, that there comes a point when it's not fulfilling, that it will lead you to your own self destruction and your own hell on earth. So, having compassion for the people that are in a wild living season of life, acknowledging that we each have a mirror to the older brother and to the younger brother, saying, oh, yeah, I've done some things, and I remember being at that low bottom, rock bottom place. And I can have compassion because I know I might return there someday. I might do this someday. I'm just a few wrong decisions away from being in that same exact situation.
Love it. Well, thanks, Danny. Thanks for your thoughts, feelings, and actions here. And friends, thanks for joining us today on this video. We hope to see you tomorrow for our CareCast.
Mhm.
Trying to figure out how to end this video, Danny, because I can't find the stop recording.